Welcome to TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast, where we discuss issues that affect the visitor economy with subject matter experts representing private businesses, sector associations, destination management organizations, post-secondary institutions, all levels of government, and other stakeholders. I'm Walt Judas, CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of British Columbia, an advocacy organization that works on behalf of its members to influence government policy and direction. My guest is Royce Chwin, President and CEO of Destination Vancouver. Welcome, Royce. Thanks for joining me.
Walt, thanks for having me. Great to be on the show.
Where are you from originally?
I am born and raised in Vancouver originally, Vancouver General Hospital. I think one of maybe 15.
I'm one of them.
Okay, there you are. So we've got to identify the other 13.
Yes, they no longer birth babies at Vancouver General, but we're among a rare breed, to be sure.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Okay.
And where were you raised? Were you raised in the city?
I was raised, I would say, in the Lower Mainland. So Vancouver, White Rock, Coquitlam, Langley, really all over my formative years.
So before we talk about your career, which has put you in different locations in Canada, did you ever live elsewhere internationally?
No, I was always here, Walt, until the career took me to Alberta.
What about schooling? Did you go on to university?
I was always here, and I did some university here, a few different courses, but I did not wind up with an MBA or a Bachelor of Science. I took the hands-on approach to learning.
Many of us did, to be sure. I've talked to so many folks in tourism that did that very thing and were given great opportunities and worked hard to achieve what they have in our sector. So what do you like to do in the city?
Well, this is a great city for walking. So walking gets you everywhere. Gets you into the park, gets you on the seawall, gets you to shopping, gets you to dining, gets you to do your errands. So I love to do all of those things in our city. It's compact, and yet there's so much to do, which is part of the reason why I love living where we live downtown, but in the proximity also to the mountains. Hop over the bridge, get up to Grouse, Seymour, Cypress Valley for outdoors. So the convenience of nature next to concrete, glass, and steel, I think, is quite extraordinary.
I know you play hockey. Do you ski?
I'm not a skier, not anymore, but we're looking forward to cracking out the snowshoes this year and going up to the mountains. And yes, I'm a hockey player, so I'm looking forward to getting back on the rink.
Yes, and I've been back on the ice for a couple of years playing for a team, and you and I share that as well. We both have a passion for being on the ice, albeit you're a goalie and I'm the guy that stands in front of you as a defender and sometimes screens you.
Yeah, well, that's happened on one or two occasions over my 30 years of playing. We need to get you out on Sunday night, Walt. But as a goalie, what I say is they have to get through 5 of you before they get to me. So if they're getting to me, what's going on with the 5 of you? We say tongue in cheek because we know goalies are accused of being a bit different.
They are indeed. So tell me about your career and the journey that eventually led you to tourism.
It was a non-straight trajectory career. I had this opportunity, Walt, a few months ago to speak in front of the leadership group program for the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. And one of those questions was leadership. So I had a brief presentation and I was thinking about, what's the trajectory? Some people, go to school, go to post, secondary, they'll go do a tourism degree, and then it's very linear and you can see the progression. And my career was the exact opposite. So I put this little diagram together and it started with the start dot, and then it had some dots to sort of where I am today, and then I drew the line, and the line went like this. And so I didn't have any linear progression. My background, I worked in the car business, I worked in retail, I worked in restaurants. Just lately we were talking about, things that you've done for job starting. When I was in the restaurant, I was cleaning out grease traps, and then I opened 35 Boston pizzas around North America as part of the lead trainer for franchisees. When I worked in the car business, we used to fill batteries by hand with boxes of bulk battery acid. So there's your danger pay. So I've done a million things in between, and the opportunities that I've had through that that collective experience allowed me to get into a position to be considered to get into the tourism realm. And I would note in a funny way that back in my early 20s, I applied for a job, and I believe it was at Tourism Vancouver, and I was turned down for that job. And so that set me in another path. So it just took me a while to finally get into tourism full circle.
Did you have your sights on tourism as a career?
No, I didn't really. I didn't really know much about tourism at all. I mean, I knew it was there, but I was looking at other things, more retail operations, marketing, those kinds of things. And tourism was always around me. It was this thing. And the job back then, it might have been in guest services or something like that. I can't even quite remember the job. It looked interesting enough. But no, I fell into the job of tourism because I was looking for my next job, and I was tired of retail and hospitality. I hadn't done it. Worked for Starbucks, worked for Blockbuster, did all these different things. And it was a chance meeting where the Canadian Tourism Commission was looking for a brand manager on a 3-month temporary contract. And that's officially how I got started in tourism. And that was June of 2008.
So speaking of the Canadian Tourism Commission, which we now know, of course, as Destination Canada, you had a great gig there. You moved to Travel Alberta to run its operation. You're now at Destination Vancouver. I've heard you jokingly say it's a backward progression, but in actual fact, I think you've got probably one of the best gigs in all of Canada.
I think so. Who knew? When I started at the national level, I thought, wow, it's Canada. The brand work that I get to do for Canada, representing this country, Canadian pride, all of those things you get to represent, how could it get any better? Then I took what I learned and had the opportunity to join Travel Alberta. And then that started connecting the dots to see how different it was from working at the 60,000 foot level now to the 30,000, 20,000 foot level at Travel Alberta, and really understanding what it was to work that much closer to communities and DMOs in cities and civic leaders and politicians in the role of Crown Corporation, and then down to the civic level, which I never had considered before working at a city level. I don't know why. I didn't know enough. Is it going to be fulfilling? And I would argue that of the three, they've all been very different, fulfilling for different ways. But I do believe I have one of the best jobs in the country working and representing Vancouver. You really can get your hands around the work that needs to be done, and you can see a difference that you can make for people in the communities in which we serve.
Kind of answered my next question, but I wondered what you had taken from your roles at Canadian Tourism Commission or Destination Canada and Travel Alberta that apply to this role at the community level, or perhaps even looking back on some of the other roles that you had, whether it was in the car business or on the hospitality side. How did that help prepare you or inform you for the role that you now have?
Goodness, I tell you that I think I had the best non-official MBA education ever, because I have been able to learn politics, work with government, which quite frankly, in these roles, there's a lot of politics. I've learned change, transition. I've experienced firsthand many times when things don't work. I've worked for small business. I've worked for an angel-funded startup. So I have lived when the bank account, and you know what it is to the last penny, to make sure that people get paid. I've lived it. I've felt it. So I think I've been able to take my private experience and understanding what it's like to be with small business, the politics and the understanding of work for not-for-profit, for government at federal and a provincial level, and been able to combine all of that to now working at the civic level in Vancouver. And that culmination of experiences, Walt, I think has really prepared me unintentionally for this kind of role, because I can speak the language of small business because I lived it. I did it. And so when I'm talking to a restaurant operator or an attraction, and they're talking about costs as an example, or food costs or operational costs or insurance, I have some understanding because I've done it. And so I can appreciate, and I'm empathetic with our industry, because the bottom line is we need to get our tails ringing, and I understand what that's like because I lived it.
I know you're probably not terribly comfortable in answering this next question, but you've been in several leadership roles over the years, particularly in tourism. What makes you a good leader?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me my goals against average for playing hockey. So thank you first. What makes me a good leader? You're right. It's a massively uncomfortable question, but I would say curiosity. I think that is a superpower. And nothing I'm going to say here is revelatory, but curiosity. We are in the people business. What we do is tourism. I think it's mindset, and my mindset, in order for me and by extension me, those around me, to be successful, has to be a mindset of change. And even when I don't think it's good change and I don't understand it, I have to step outside myself and ask those around me and be vulnerable enough to get the feedback and understand it as a leader, so that I can enable the company, the organization, and the people in it. And if I was to take two things that always grounds me in my leadership style, it's asking and answering these questions. How do we stay relevant, and how do we show value? To me, it all comes down to those two things by which you can filter all of your decisions, your strategy plans, your leadership approach. How do I stay relevant as a leader? How do I show relevance and value as a leader? And those are the kinds of things that I think about in this role, because it is a privilege to lead people. And there's not a day that goes by where I'm not grateful for the opportunity to lead this organization and this incredible city and these incredible people that I work around. And so I try to stay very grounded. I don't float above anybody. And I would say, maybe lastly for this, if you look at our signature block, it's just a little hint about how I think my role is in the organization. And all our signature blocks start with team member first, it's title second.
Well, you've done a tremendous job since you started with Destination Vancouver at the height of COVID in 2020, no less. And you've got great respect, not only in the city, but in the industry in general. I want to transition to talking about Destination Vancouver. How would you describe its mandate to those that perhaps don't know much about the organization?
Sure. Simply said, it is a mandate of destination management, meaning we have a responsibility for sales and promotion of the city, get the tills to ring and bring people here. And secondly, we have a role for development. How is it that we work with communities or civic leaders or our industry in order to improve the offering, improve the city, the destination reputation? How do we look to improve the storyline that is Vancouver that makes this an attractive city? So I would say that we can no longer be the DMO of the 90s, and that is simply sales and promotion. The development side is equally as important. And that's what our mandate was transformed into, thanks to the support of the board, because I go back to relevance and value. And everything around us was changing. So our mandate needed to change to a destination management organization. Sales, promotion, and development.
On the development side, what are some of the initiatives that you are working on together with other partners, whether it's the City of Vancouver, the province, maybe it's the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, and many other stakeholders that are a part of development in general, but particularly on the tourism side?
There's two, I think, really good examples. One is the development of supporting, cuisine, food, beverage as a vertical. And so we brought Michelin to Vancouver just about 5 years ago today. When we look at that, you could look at that as a marketing partnership. I look at that as development. How do we develop the restaurant scene in Vancouver and give it a different level of cachet? So that's one thing. Another thing that we did was strike up the Hotel Development Task Force of Vancouver, recognizing we had a phenomenal shortage of hotel rooms and accommodations that had accumulated such that we're going to have some challenges for sure. And so when we started that committee about 2 years ago now, there were 9 hotels in the pipeline for development. There was no considered hotel development policy at the city level. Today, we actually have a hotel policy at the city level that encourages and streamlines the development process. And we've moved from 9 properties in the pipeline to 28 properties in the pipeline, representing about 5,000, just over 5,000 rooms. So to me, those are two development things that work on the infrastructure of our city to make it easier to promote and sell.
So I want to flesh that out a little bit more in just a moment. But as I talk about the organization or ask you about Destination Vancouver, you mentioned relevance and value. How are you setting the organization up for success? How do you measure those things?
So we looked at what the foundation of the organization was built on, what I inherited relative to the time that we're in and where we saw things going. And so we looked at the brand. how we were positioning the city. Was that up to date? We looked at our digital footprint and our digital acumen inside the organization. We fundamentally looked at the mandate. Is the mandate organized in such a way that it had some future proofing in terms of where we're going? The organizational structure of people, how was that aligned? And from a destination development perspective, were we actually doubling down and looking at what we needed to do in the infrastructure of the city around destination development? So whether it was hotel development, whether or not it was creating a process by which we could go after cultural events, festivals, sporting events in a more considered manner. And so we looked at all of those pieces, Walt, and we said, if the world around us is changing, what do we need to do internally in the organization to position it to move forward versus constantly catching up? And I would say that we've actually ticked off, I would say, most of those boxes. The other thing that I forgot to mention was structurally our board bylaws. Our board bylaws were out of date, and that impacts how we can recruit people on the board, the mix and the change that we need of board members as the organization evolves. And so we have literally checked off all of those things over the last 5 years and evolved them and changed them and modernized them such that I think we're in a much better position now as we go forward. And the success is what we're seeing in terms of the performance of the organization and the destination in of itself and the markers that we consider.
What does the board do for you? How important is the board? What is it that they are providing to Destination Vancouver that helps you fulfill your mandate?
That's a great question, and I think often overlooked for people that are a new CEO and not understanding how to work with boards. And I don't say that as somebody that's trying to school people, but as my learned experience in adjusting my mindset. So when the board asked me that question when I was being interviewed here just over 5 years ago, I'll never forget it. How do you see working with the board? And to me, it's two things. One is the governance, the fiduciary responsibility of a good board. They need to be doing that. But secondly, you need to look at the board as a competitive advantage for the organization and treat them as such. Engage them relative to the types of challenges and risks and opportunities that the organization might face. Hotel development was one of those things. For us, as an example, they were very much involved in that, the change of the brand, the change of the mandate. So consider them a thought partner and talk to them and speak to them, and engage them in a way that is around thought partnership. I think that's made a world of difference with our board. I really, really enjoy our board and the discussions and some of the meaty things that we get into because people feel engaged and we treat them that way. And I suggested to the board, I think the board needs to have a goal, not just the organization. So the board goal should be, we should want the DVAN board to be one of the top 10 not-for-profit boards in Vancouver. We should aspire to that and build that reputation so that we get great people that want to come through and volunteer and be additive to the organization and the organization at large.
And to make sure it's a diverse board that represents all of the sectors of tourism, but even beyond.
Absolutely. So, as an example, Chuck Wee has joined our board, and Chuck's background, if you know Chuck, he is the Senior Vice President for Hudson Properties. It's real estate. Primarily, that's what he does. Well, a big part of tourism is real estate, whether it's hotels, whether it's public plaza or private plaza development. And so having a Chuck join the board and bring this commercial real estate experience, particularly as it relates to hotel development and understanding what it means for that. We never had that before. So he brings a wealth of knowledge in terms of how we need to think differently in the board. And so that's a great example of how we're looking at board structure and say, what are the right kinds of folks that we need to have on? And I love some of the folks that we've added onto our board recently. Tom Lancaster, Gravel Island as an example. And of course, we've had a great cadre of board members who represent sectors on our board right now. So we're really evolving the board into the strategic superpower.
My guest on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast is Royce Chwin, President and CEO of Destination Vancouver. So let's get back to the hotels. You mentioned there are over 24, I think 27 hotels now in the pipeline. Are they predominantly within the downtown Vancouver core? And how realistic is it that many of those projects will actually come to fruition? You alluded to the new policy change within the city of Vancouver that is helpful, but let's face it, it's real estate to buy is expensive, to redevelop is expensive, construction costs are going up, the cost of doing business is rising. We desperately need those hotels, and it's terrific the work that you've done as a part of this committee to really make it attractive to build a hotel in the city. But where do you see the timeline for those bills, and how realistic is it that we'll see a number of new hotels in the foreseeable future?
Whether we'll get all 28 hotels, I think 29 hotels is hard to say. And new hotels are being added sort of on a quarterly, 6-month basis. So the list is growing. From a timing perspective, given what's going on with real estate, return to work or not return to work in real estate in Vancouver, potential real estate conversion, that's happening. So there's that as well. The stabilization of some of the costs for hotels, that's helpful. Financing is a whole different thing. But I think fundamentally, what are the things within our control that will allow hotels to start with? Well, the core was that was a hotel development policy. And what we've heard from some developers that are actively in the pipeline going through the process is that the hotel development policies actually made a difference and has sped up or streamlined or made it much easier to work with the cities. We look from the perspective of where can we impact and affect change where there are barriers. And that was one of those things that we could move on. And so will we get all 28 or 34 if it gets to that point? I can't say that. But what I can say is that I believe we have 4 hotels that are currently in build right now. We're getting hotels that are getting approved and going to public hearings, and that's very positive. So I like the momentum, Walt, of building this, but we're a decade and a half behind. There's no illusions that we're going to have hotels built, 5,000 rooms in the next 2 years. That's not going to happen. But if we can continue to strike while the iron is hot, as an example, given the conditions right now, then I think we'll be in good stead to start reversing the inventory decline and increasing it. The goal is to get to 10,000 rooms for Vancouver proper by 2050. We're half of the way there. And most of those hotels, but not all of them, are located downtown, some out on the Broadway corridor, as an example.
Excellent progress, to be sure. Now, is that the biggest barrier to growth of the tourism industry in Vancouver, the lack of hotel rooms?
I would say it's one of them for sure. We need places for people to stay. Given the level of dimension in our particular tourism offering, we're not landlocked. So we have cruise shops coming in. Well, that's $2.1 billion worth of business annually, 1.2, 1.3 million passengers coming through the city. So you have that at high season. The number of business events that come through Vancouver, and we've been phenomenally successful, particularly this year at booking business events, particularly citywides. So that's going to put a strain on the city. Then layer on culture, then layer on sporting events and layering them in. And so, the number of rooms that we have today is not right size to the size of city capacity that we should have. We're sitting at about 12,000 rooms. Other cities that are reasonably comparative to Vancouver size and layout, like a San Francisco, I think San Francisco has over 30,000 rooms. Now, we're not suggesting that we want to be that, but if we don't address this, then we will have serious problems where I think the business starts to fold in on itself a little bit, and we start turning people away, because the costs become prohibitive because of compression issues. So we have to address that. We have to look at seasonality and create a base by which we can be more competitive and not start turning away business, which I feel like we're on the cusp of doing if we don't address it.
Is there other infrastructure that is needed to bolster the city from a tourism perspective, notwithstanding the benefits to residents, but perhaps new attractions? People are always looking for something fresh and new, and particularly those that are repeat visitors. What more is needed in Vancouver, if anything?
100%. It's like we planned that question and we didn't. Tourism attraction or experience investment has been woefully low. Now, I'm not talking about opening up new restaurants or things like that, but one of the last major attractions that was opened from the ground up was Flyover Canada. I think that's over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
Notwithstanding the I think it's about $26 million investment that Grouse Mountain has made. Michael Cameron will correct me, but it was significant. So now we're upgrading an experience. There's been some event spaces and things like that have opened up. But I feel like there's been a lack of investment in gated or non-gated experiences. And we've been trying to offset that by bringing in sporting events or cultural events like, Just for Laughs or Laughs in the Park or, rugby sevens or cricket or those kinds of things. And so I question whether or not we've created the conditions in the business. Real estate is expensive, operational costs are expensive, but have we created the conditions to show that Vancouver has a robust visitor economy? $9 billion annually, which is just under half of the province's total visitor economy, comes through here at the anchor tenant. So we're addressing that. There's a show in France called MIPIM, and it's an investment attraction trade show. We're going to go for the first time under the banner of Destination Canada, and we're going to see if whether or not the story of Vancouver as an investment potential can help lure or create some interest in terms of attraction investment into Vancouver. And to be sure, our attractions that are currently here are incredibly important, and they have not been as strong in terms of the business over the last couple of years. And I think the challenge with trying to invest or bringing attractions here is the traveler dollar is getting eaten up by travel costs and accommodation costs in a city that has a lot of non-gated opportunities, which doesn't leave a whole lot of money left for, quite frankly, gated attractions. And so we really need to keep an eye on this and work with our attractions to try to develop the business so that it shows a strong return on investment for somebody that's new.
Is there anything that levels of government can do to make better the attraction for new businesses or entrepreneurs to set up shop here, whether it's at the civic level, provincial, or federal level?
I think that there is. Often what I've heard from small business owners, and this will be no surprise to you, whether it's here, when I was at the CTC, the Canadian Tourism Commission, Travel Alberta, is the regulatory red tape and the bureaucracy. And the longer it takes for somebody to open up a business that they're accruing carrying costs, the more difficult it is to get off on the right foot, or the hoops that have to get jumped through for grants. And so it seems to me that from a government perspective, whether civic, provincial, or federal, there needs to be a mind shift in that while we consider major infrastructure projects, which are very good and very important and create a certain number of jobs that may take 5, 10, or 15 years, the tourism industry as an investment for small business can turn over returns very quickly. 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, business up and operating and contributing to the Canadian economy at all three levels. And so I'm not sure that that is always understood by government, especially if somebody has not actually run a business. And so look at it from the perspective of creating the conditions, whether it's regulatory or bureaucratic hurdles, to get and enable small business to open. Because quite frankly, there's only so many dams you're going to build. There's only so many pipelines you're going to build. There's only so many major infrastructure projects you're going to build, which are good. I get that, but don't ignore this other part of the business that can return results quickly.
Well said. Does the convention center need expansion again?
The convention center could expand if we had the accommodations to go with it. So yes. Like I said earlier, we have been extraordinarily successful in landing citywide conferences because of the offering that we have in Vancouver. Could we bring in more? Could we put in more people? I don't doubt that if this trajectory considered. I would also say, and hats off to the federal government on the program that was used by business to attract conferences. That was an incredibly successful program that has stopped. And so if you can leverage federal funding to help bring in more conventions and business, this convention center definitely could expand because we're filling it pretty close to capacity.
You mentioned the cost of doing business and the regulatory and policy burdens. What are some of the other things that you're hearing from your membership about challenges within the sector that need to be addressed that Destination Vancouver is deeply involved in?
Other than the cost of doing business writ large, I would say the other thing that is important to us in Vancouver, but any community in Canada, is the state of downtown and the protection of destination reputation, whether businesses and whether people coming to work or visitors are feeling safe, quite frankly. So health, wellness, safety, and security downtown, we are an advocate for that particular space because it's all about destination reputation. And we need to lobby for that. Interestingly, Walt, it seems to me that some of our industry feel that, to be quite transparent, and this came out in the survey and some conversations, is that the DVAN needs to stay in our lane, just do sales and promotion. And we always will. That's a core of what we do. But it seems to me that if we are a good citizen, a good corporate citizen, a good not-for-profit citizen in the city by which we do business, then we have to use our voice, whether it's organizationally or the CEO's voice, talk about these other issues, because it is about community and what's happening hasn't been working. London drugs, folded up shop in the Woodwards building downtown, that's a blow. So the issues around a safe and secure downtown and respectful downtown, recognizing we do still have people that are unhoused and are challenged. I ask, has all of the things that we've been doing, quite frankly, working in the way that they should? When we have buses that have a hard time navigating through downtown, as an example, or visitors who are nervous about downtown, what are they saying about the community and how we're looking at and addressing the issues and challenges that we have? And so I think we have a voice and a role there in terms of city building and placemaking as it relates to safety and security.
Issues are very complex, to be sure, and everybody plays a role at whatever level. But I think where Destination Vancouver is positioned is in the right area, and that is to be an advocate and seeing how we as an industry can be part of some of those solutions, working with many other stakeholders that will help hopefully one day resolve some of the challenges that we face. Morph now into opportunities. Are there new market development opportunities for Vancouver? Park sport for a minute, because I want to talk about World Cup, but are there new market development opportunities? And if so, where are they?
Yes. The fast answer is yes. How we can build into these new market opportunities remain to be seen. So we have that direct flight to Singapore. Singapore unlocks the whole Asian region there for business, which is exciting. What we can do, I think we are still feeling our way in terms of what we can do because budget is not limitless. So that's a new opportunity. To revisit an old opportunity that needs to be rebuilt is China. And will China come back to the way that it was pre-pandemic? All indicators would say no. Does it need to? Not necessarily, but it is a market that needs to be rebuilt. But when we look at market opportunity and what's out there, we start to look at some fundamentals and basics, and that is some of the operational items. Is there direct air? What kind of visa access do these travelers have? Do they have a demographic that is interested in what Vancouver has to offer? So we start to qualify some of those markets, and our historic or mature markets are still markets that are very, very worthy. However, are there considerations for Latin America? Are there other considerations for Europe? I think World Cup could be an interesting litmus test to see what other interest there is out there for Vancouver that may identify something that all the statistical research didn't provide us or didn't illuminate for us.
So I think about the work that you do with the airlines and YVR and perhaps others in the metro region. Are there plans to explore markets from a research perspective, aside from World Cup and what that may draw? But do you look 3 to 5 years down the road for where there may be lift opportunities from South America by way of example, I hear that all the time. Is that something that is a normal course of practice within the organization?
100%. We look very far out. We work very closely with our great partners at YVR. We want to make sure that we support route development. So whether it's South America, or if you'd been following the news last week, there was a big story on the potential for flights from the UAE, the Emirates as an example. So that is an interesting market that could open up here more broadly into Vancouver. So we're always looking forward, and we're always keeping an eye on just over a handful and a half of different markets, like France. We don't actively market in France, but we keep watching what's happening there. And is that a potential market, as an example, although a mature market, but not one that's tapped by us? So we're always looking farther ahead and always making sure that we keep in good contact with YVR to understand where they think there's market opportunity, and then what kind of support could we provide for that market, whether it is a first in place market or it might be tertiary, but we keep track of it.
Given the context of the political situation between our respective countries, are you still bullish on U.S. visitation, which has typically been the bread and butter for Vancouver aside from domestic visitors?
The U.S. situation is concerning. I don't think I could say otherwise. It is concerning. The markets that we typically go after, of course, have to be high passport penetration markets. They're typically West Coast, a little bit of East Coast. So we know fundamentally, where are the passports? They're typically, although not specifically identified between Republican or Democrat markets, but we have an idea of where travelers come from in terms of which states. And so the US is our biggest source of business outside of Canada. Does it worry us? For sure. And that's why we need to make sure that we are very much keeping an eye on other markets overseas and not over relying on the Canadian visitor. That Canadian visitor, as a result of what's happening, are making decisions anyways. Us marketing to them in a very forward sense, other to remind them Vancouver's here, the surrounding area, which is great. But the US is a perfect example of what you shouldn't do from a brand, country, reputation perspective. Because I believe it's a Glenn Korstrom, a Business of Vancouver column that just came out. I think it was on the weekend, maybe last week. And it looks like 11 straight months down Canadian visitors going to the US, which is unheard of. So they're either coming to Canada or they're going somewhere else. And so we have to make sure that we're looking at our markets. Now, to get into the weeds a little bit, from a leisure perspective, people are going into different places. Canadians are coming here, locals, etc. From a business perspective, Walt, it's incredible the amount of association group business coming out of the US and coming to Vancouver who seem to be largely unaffected or don't care or not going to have their politics determine their decisions of where their members want to go. And so they're coming to Vancouver and they're rebooking into Vancouver. And I would say that's not necessarily unique for Vancouver, but that's certainly a trend that we're experiencing here in the city. That's
still
a good
very
thing.
positive nonetheless.
Very, very positive.
What will World Cup do for Vancouver?
World Cup will be the next destination leapfrog. What do I mean? We think about Vancouver's history and as trajectory for evolution and changes, transformation has come along. We have these leapfrog moments. Expo 86, that was a leapfrog moment. Then we went from Expo and then we had the 2010 games, another leapfrog moment that put us up. Then we had the Women's World Cup in 2015, another leapfrog moment. And so now we've got the biggest sporting event in the world coming to Canada, coming to Vancouver. We think it'll be another leapfrog moment in terms of putting Vancouver on the world stage and perhaps different ways than what we had done in the past. Certainly, Expo 86 put us on the world stage at that time over a summer period. The Olympics did it for winter and showcased all of that. This puts us right back in the crosshairs of summer. So I think it will really elevate Vancouver and the surrounding region, and by extension, BC. All of the things that are available here, should we do our work right, and we can cut through the noise of our 15 other competitive cities. It's extraordinary, the opportunity to introduce Vancouver, perhaps just to some new markets that may have never considered Vancouver at all.
So that would be on the sporting side then?
That would be on the sporting side.
Yeah. Do you ever see the Olympics returning?
Yes, I see the Olympics returning if we have a mindset to do it. It really comes down to that. Do we want to do this or not? And for something like the World Cup, the flip side of that is that does industry feel enabled? Does industry feel like they get a benefit out of the World Cup? And depending who you talk to, it's interesting. Some feel that it's just displacement. People are coming here in the summer anyways. It's not going to do anything. Others are excited because of what World Cup represents to them. I think we have to think long-term after World Cup is done, what benefit it is. And so I would look at that as a whole and to say, if you wanted to bring in Olympics here, and given the success, the industry would have to be fully wanting to back that up and say, yep, we can pull this off again. It was an excellent experience in Vancouver. There's no perfection here. What did we learn? What could we do better? And it would be fantastic, I think, for Vancouver and Whistler and the surrounding areas. We proved that we could host.
Yeah, and I think that was a real litmus test for events like World Cup. We were able to do that so well, so professionally. We have the talent in the city and in the province. We still have a lot of that infrastructure, some of which we would have to tap into and repurpose for Olympic purposes. But nonetheless, I think there's still somewhat of an appetite, particularly for those that were here during that time. But I think you'll see the same atmosphere during World Cup, and we will experience a level of pride and euphoria, perhaps, that we haven't seen really since the Olympics.
I agree. I think the World Cup is going to pull out a different kind of fan. than the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. We feel like we own Winter Olympics because it is Canada, and it's that natural affinity for winter sport and Winter Paralympic sport. So I think World Cup will expose our city to a very different type of customer. But nonetheless, here's your interesting stat for the day. Vancouver is the only city in the world to have hosted a World Expo, a Winter Olympics, a FIFA Women's World Cup, and a Men's World Cup. We're the only city that's ever done it. So we are a city that's built for hosting, irrespective of those different audiences who have come to the city, which I think is marvelous and speaks volumes about Vancouver's reputation, not only built for hosting, but our ability to welcome all kinds of people from around the world to this beautiful, big little city that we have.
Wow, that's a fabulous leg to stand on. That's a fabulous marketing opportunity, and what an amazing thing to build a reputation on, having hosted 4 significant events like that. It does again demonstrate that we're capable as a city and as a province of doing virtually anything in that realm.
Absolutely. And it comes down to mindset. Do we want to do this or not? Do we want to allow the things that drag us down that need to be done, policy, bureaucracy, and all of that? And of course, it's all comes down to money, of course. So it can be done, I guess, really is the point. It's a decision. Do we want to get it done?
So we're almost at time here, Royce. I want to transition very quickly with just one question, and it's the one that all businesses are asking. It seems to be drawing most attention away from, I shouldn't say away, but perhaps complementing some of the things that organizations are doing and trying to figure out from a sales and marketing perspective, and that's AI. How will AI transform the tourism sector, and how is Destination Vancouver responding to the options and opportunities within the AI world, which, for the record, is not new. It's in some respects repackaged, but the technology is changing so rapidly, and you alluded to change and being ready and accepting of change at the start of our conversation.
Great question. And we have some concrete actions that we've taken. So I mentioned earlier that one of the big pillars we needed to evolve and change was our digital posture in the organization. And so while we were doing that and completely rebuilding from the ground up our digital posture, AI dropped right in the middle of our planning. So we were able to incorporate AI into the design of our digital structure and our website versus simply just bolting on a chatbot. And it's been an incredible learning experience in terms of user behavior on our website that's very different. So that's just one piece. Secondly, we've established an AI council inside the organization. So we have representatives of every business unit that all come together on this AI council and look at AI externally. How are we using it for marketing, sales, promotions, destination development? And internally, how do we help educate team members on how they might use AI tools to improve productivity? And so we're going through the learning of that. In fact, we've got a couple of training sessions that are coming up. So we're trying to enable and embrace the organization into the world of AI, but no doubt the speed and the either opportunity or the carnage, depending how you're looking at it, is changing traveler behaviors when they look. Google search is a perfect example how you can search for Google and it's attempting to completely bypass the DMO. Well, Google can only do so much in its gargantuanness. And so the DMO has an opportunity to make sure that we're creating content that still brings people back here and quite frankly, more to the industry. So that change is happening. But there's that expression that is AI is not going to take your job. It's a human that knows how to use AI can take your job. But let's not forget what tourism is about, and it's about people. And I had the privilege of speaking in front of the Clef d'Or just last week and our concierges. And what just a fabulous group of professionals. And we were talking a little bit about AI. And at the end of the day, what they do in terms of personalized service and recommendations and human-to-human connection will not be replaced by algorithms. Their code is trustworthiness, building the business, respecting small business, trying to curate or create memories for visitors, whatever they're doing. And so they may use AI enabled searches and information in the background, but let's not forget the human element of tourism and our excitement for adopting AI. Without the movement of people, we do not have a business. Without the face-to-face interaction, we don't have a business. And so there's a place for it and it will change by the minute, but let's not over-index and forget about the humans required to bring tourism to life in the community.
Very good points. Royce, final question. Where in the world haven't you visited that you hope to in the not too distant future?
There's such a long list. However, two things that are coming up on our radar. One is a safari, an African safari. Cannot wait. We're planning to do this in a couple of years. The second thing is I would like to do a historical war tour of Europe. I would like to go to the places where freedom was fought for, and not to get on a stump here, but I'd like to go to those places where these significant world events happen to create the freedom and democracy we have now, and really be in place and learn to do that versus just reading in books and watching fantastical movies. And so those are two trips that are being considered right now.
Yeah, the latter one's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that before, but wow, would that ever be educational and moving, to be sure.
100%, and due respect to all those that have come before us, those that are serving now, and I think there's a respect for just the world that we're in right now. So what a way to educate ourselves. But I will note that this week we are flying to Ottawa. We are driving down to Hamilton College, north of Boston, to watch our eldest nephew play hockey in his final year of college hockey at Hamilton University. So that's the next trip that's going to happen, and we can't wait to go see him at university for college.
What a terrific aunt and uncle you are.
Well,
You and your wife.
we don't have kids, so we adopt all our nieces and nephews and try to be present and engage and support them in whatever they're doing. And so we're looking forward to doing that.
Good on you, Royce. This has been fun. Thanks so much. I always appreciate speaking with you, and I learn so much every time we have a chance to connect. So I appreciate your time today.
Walt, thank you. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I appreciate the invitation. And kudos to you, my friend, for an incredible career in this industry. You cut your teeth a little bit at Tourism Vancouver, and it seems like every third person I've met might have come through the doors, but what you have done to support us and the time that you have invested as a human into our industry speaks volumes in terms of the character that you are, Walt. And this isn't the Mutual Admiration Society, but it is in the results and the way that you carry yourself, which I think are the values of people that are in this industry. So thank you for what you have done and what you continue to do.
Thank you, Royce. Very kind words and deeply appreciated. That's Royce Chwin, President and CEO of Destination Vancouver, who joined me today on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast. And thank you for listening. Please share this episode with your professional colleagues and decision makers to help with our advocacy efforts as we seek to build a vibrant, sustainable, and resilient tourism and hospitality industry in British Columbia. Visit our website at tiabc.ca, sign up for our newsletter, become a member of TIABC, or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to find out more about our next Voice of Tourism podcast. If you have a tourism policy issue within BC that needs attention, please send me a note at wjudas@tiabc.ca. This is Walt Judas bidding you farewell until next time.